Well, if you're in our school, you'll see a school that's not run by adults. So
how many students about?
So we could have one studio, say an elementary studio that has maybe 30 learners and one adult. And that's a good thing. The more adults that get into the classroom, we say, the worse the experience gets.
And that's for kids how old, that ratio?
That's about 6.5 to around 11.
Okay, so you have 30 kids from 6.5 to 11 in one room.
Yep.
And there's one adult in there.
Yes.
Okay, what's the adult doing?
So the adult is what we call a Socratic facilitator. So they're operating in an inquiry-based fashion. Primarily what they do is we launch every day with a Socratic discussion. And that's where we put young people in the shoes of a hero, facing a tough decision or dilemma. And then we provide two choices, A-B choices, or maybe more, that are opposed, very opposed to each other. But both could be seen as equally acceptable answers. And then that facilitator, their job is to allow the young people to engage in a discussion and a debate. We do this for 15 minutes every morning.
And that's how things start.
That's how every day launches that way. It launches intentionally, which is, I think, something we can talk about too, is that a bell ringing to start a day is not an intentional launch.
Right, it's a forced launch.
Yes, and so with us, what we do is we say, hey, we're here. Maybe the studio's facing something like there's a lack of respect or something like that, or they're upcoming to a exhibition that we hold. I'll talk about those. And it's like crunch time. So we'll put them in the shoes of a hero, usually a real hero from history that faced a similar situation with high stakes, discuss and debate, and then...
And there's two sides to the argument.
Oh yes, there's always two sides to the argument.
And all the kids from 6.5 to 11 participate.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you know, in my graduate seminar, what I used to do, as I learned how to run seminars rather than lecturing, because I like to lecture, and that worked well for me, I would assign a paper to students. They would read it in class, because often they wouldn't read it. They'd say they read it, but they wouldn't have. So they'd read it in class. And then we would derive alternative standpoints from the paper, two opposing viewpoints. And I would assign a viewpoint to one group of four, another group of four. It was usually 16 kids in the class. The other two groups would evaluate and grade and provide feedback. And then we'd go around the room. And I assigned it arbitrarily. And the goal was to form a group of four and to lay out your argument and then to conduct something approximating a debate with the other team. And it was really useful for the students. It was engaging for them. And they had a chance to lay out their argument and to make it publicly and to learn how to speak publicly, but also to learn that because the sides, so to speak, were assigned arbitrarily, they learned how to understand that there was many things to be said on multiple sides of an argument, right? And then to really put that in place. And that was a very effective model. And so you're doing something like that in the first 15 minutes.
First 15 minutes every day. And these are...
Why is that the first thing the kids do?
Well, I think, one, it's an intentional way to start the day, but I think you have to back up and understand that, something I like to say to parents is that, look, young people are embedded in a story, in a narrative. They wake up every day in a story. And so we, as parents, and I think as adults, we should just be very thankful we get to be a part of this story. It's so much fun to be a part of the story. And so when we talk about entering into our school, there's this idea in game making about the magic circle. The magic circle is essentially you enter a place, and when you enter that place, the world changes. It's that world. And so our world at the school, we are heavily embedded in stories and narratives. The hero's journey is something that really is tagging and cataloging the way we operate the school, that you're a young person on a journey to find your calling and change the world. And that's a true calling on your life. And the world needs something of you. And so what we're doing in these Socratic discussions is really embedding them in story because, can I digress here just for a second?
Hey, digress away.
So we talk about the idea of building character or a moral education. And I think that's somewhat of a misnomer because number one, parents are the primary people that should be helping to impart a moral education on children. And what role does a school have? So it's actually very interesting. If you look at the work of Martin Buber, he was He talked about in his essay, The Education of Character. He talked about this idea how he would try to teach character lessons in a classroom. And he would actually say the opposite would have the effect. It would be that he would talk about how you shouldn't lie, and then he'd get an essay from a person in the class that was the biggest person that would not tell the truth about how you shouldn't lie.
Right.
He'd talk about how you shouldn't bully the weak, and you get the strong ones snickering. He'd say how you can't teach ethics in an ethics class.
Yeah.
You teach ethics and morals in a number of ways: experience, relation to others, but also stories.
Yeah.
And so embedding young people in stories from the start, in the start of the day, to let them know you're here on an important journey. And there's going to be a right and a wrong in the way that you operate. And it's not always that we're doing a discussion like that, but often it can be. How do we treat other people? How do we act with respect?
What do you see when you watch the kids engage in this debate? You have kids from 6.5, you said, to 11. So what would an observer see if he or she was watching this interaction?
Actually, I have a great story to share. Akira the Don, who we both know, he came and visited our school, and his son Hercules sat in on some Socratic launches with us. And Akira came back to the office. We did this big show with him, with learners, and he was a DJ, a world-class example that we brought in, and he was so gracious to come work with us. Akira went and observed a launch with his son in it, and he came back, and I said, "Hey, what'd you think?" And he said, "It brought a tear to my eye to think that these young people can treat each other with such respect, and that they can disagree so politely, and that they can have their views heard and understood."
Why don't the 11-year-olds dominate the 6.5-year-olds?
Often they do in the sense of they discuss more. They'll verbalize more. However, if you have been a 6.5-year-old that's been in that position and you've grown up in the system, you understand that it's to your advantage to help make sure the younger ones have their voice heard as well. And so what you'll see if you observe a Socratic discussion at Wonder is, one, we start off with a polarizing topic about two different choices that is embedding them in a story. But we follow what's called the rules of just conduct. And those rules of just conduct are, how do we operate in a Socratic discussion? So the discussion leader might say, hey, which rule of just conduct do we want to focus on today? And it might be listening with our whole body. So it's like, and then they'll hold each other accountable throughout the discussion to say, hey, remember we promised to listen with our whole body.
What does that mean?
It means that they're not turning around, or they're not,
they're paying attention.
They're paying attention.
And how do they call each other out on that without that becoming bullying or dominating?
I think what you'll find is those types of things are a product of a different type of environment. When you're in an environment that's based on mutual accountability and based on peer-to-peer learning, and you're building a tribe, you see people within the tribe as not as an enemy or somebody that's competing with you, but somebody that you're trying to help the whole tribe move up. And that's what we do see. Now, I tell parents all the time, hey, when you have a child that's 6.5 or 7 just entering into the elementary environment, and they're in a Socratic discussion, they're absorbers. They're observing and absorbing information. It's one of the best ways they learn how to interact in one of those discussions, by watching a 10-year-old or 11-year-old in those discussions.
The leading cause for death among infants in the U.S. and the world is abortion. Sadly, with the abortion pill accounting for over 50% of all abortions, babies' lives are at an even greater risk. In the midst of this awful tragedy, we can do something about it thanks to our new partners at Preborn's network of clinics. Preborn clinics stand strong, offering love, support, and compassion to hurting women, helping them to make the right choice. By letting a woman see her baby with a free ultrasound and hear the heartbeat, a baby's chance at life is doubled. These clinics provide mothers who choose life with maternity and baby clothes, diapers, car seats, counseling, and much more. All of these services are provided free of charge, and up to 2 years of assistance is granted. So join us in the fight to save these precious lives. This year, Jordan Peterson's listeners have a goal to save 11,000 babies. One ultrasound is $28, and any donation amount will help and is tax deductible. To donate, dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 baby. Or go to preborn.com/Jordan. That's preborn.com/Jordan. We are the answer to save these lives. Dial now.
Right. And that's interesting too, because the 10-year-old 9-year-old, 10-year-old, 11-year-old, first 6.5-year-old is someone who's close to their proximal zone of development. So like kids tend to hero worship kids who are slightly older than them, old enough so that they can appear as a model for their behavior forward.
Yes.
I mean, kids in grade 4 really admire kids in grade 6. They're a little afraid of them. They think they're mighty beings. That's the term Larry Arnn, he's the president of Hillsdale College, used, which I think is quite funny. But you have them in your class. And I would imagine too that the 10 and 11-year-olds also come to regard themselves as role models for the younger kids, which is a really good responsibility to put on them. So, but they're treating the little kids properly. They're learning how to do that. And you're saying that they do that more or less as a consequence of being embedded in a culture that's promoting exactly that kind of interaction.
No, absolutely. And you mentioned that the older ones see themselves as role models. It's not just that they see themselves. They're in positions elected by younger ones to lead. So we have in our elementary, it's broken up into squads. And each squad has a squad leader.
So the class is broken up into a squad?
Yes, not during the day. It's just you're a member of this squad, and so you might have a meeting on a Monday.
And how many people would be in a squad?
Around 6, something like that.
Okay, so you have your little squad,
Yep.
and they have meetings. And what do the meetings consist of?
They talk about wins and losses from the week before. What people are hoping.
Performance review.
Yep, something like that. What you hope that you want to accomplish the next week. Maybe are you stuck somewhere that your squad leader can help you in that? So you really, these older learners that have earned it, because remember, they have to get elected by the younger ones in the squad.
Elected meaning what?
That they're into a group and they elect the leader of the group.
And how does that work technically? What does an election
Technically,
look like?
the beginning of the year, it looks like they get together and they have a vote. Well, they'll write down who they want to lead their squad. And there's also a process for impeachment of that squad leader if they're not upholding the promises that they've committed to for the group. And so the younger ones have a voice within there. And it also helps to keep tyranny at bay.
Right. So so you've got the beginnings of a democratic polity there. And how do the little kids know who to vote for?
Well, that's a learning process.
Yeah, okay.
Because
so they get to know the other kids.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's following somebody that's a little bit older, but you are correct in this. It's that they see somebody older than them, but it's also that they see somebody they could embody. They're about to be there. I'm going to be that person in that age group at some point pretty soon. And that's a really powerful thing.
And is it a goal, do you think it's honest to say that it's a goal for the little kids to, well, obviously they end up as bigger kids, but are your schools running well enough so the little kids actually would like to be elected as a leader at some point? That's actually a vision rather than something that teachers only dream the kids want?
I'll say yes, but here's what I say about that. I think it also comes with cognitive development. As they move away from social being the work that they do, because younger ones love to play and they love to be in social groups with other people. Schoolwork is not that important to them. And if it's gamified, which we do, they love doing it. But as they get older, what happens is they see their peers moving from one studio to the other. And then they start to take on work as their work, so to speak. Like they really want to accomplish this thing to reach this next level. And then yes, it's a rite of passage. They see that. And we see this development happen. If you're 6, 7, 8-year-old, a lot of your work is social. And a lot of it, and that's what it should be, rather than just academic, pushing academic work onto a young person. And this kind of goes back to the structure of how we operate, and I'll digress a little bit here, is, look, part of what got me interested in doing this in the first place was that I didn't believe that young people should be in a desk for 7 hours a day. I didn't fit in that at all. And so when my son was born, and I heard that question from my uncle, I thought, I don't care what I have to do, if I have to move somewhere or start something or whatever it may be, I'm not going to put my children into a system that doesn't understand the gifts and abilities I have just because they don't fit on the conveyor belt. And so at our school, when you look at that, young people have the freedom to work with their peers. They have the freedom to choose the work that they'd like to do. Also, they have the freedom to be distracted as long as they're not distracting other people. They can exit the room for a while if they need to be distracted. And I think there's this whole idea in education, in the elementary especially, of young people are so distractible. Well, it's like we're thinking that, okay, we don't understand that the prefrontal cortex has a protracted maturation. You can't force development in that way.
They're distractible if they're bored stiff.
Yes.
You know, kids can concentrate on something for a very long period of time if they're interested in it.
Absolutely.
So the distractibility, and this is the case for human beings more generally, is if you see a pronounced trend across a number of people, the first thing to presume is there's something situational driving it rather than something temperamental.
Yeah.
And so you might say, well, little kids are distractible. Maybe it's because they're bored to death in the conventional classroom. And I would say that's particularly true of active boys. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about squads and we've talked a little bit about studios. You started talking about what happens first thing in the morning. Okay, so the kids have a discussion and they're trying to iron out a complex moral conundrum, and they're doing that as a consequence of Socratic dialogue. And there's an age-graded there's a group of kids that spans quite an age, and the older kids help lead the younger kids and they take responsibility for it, and the little kids have something to look forward to.